For over a century, the name of the American industrialist, entrepreneur, and innovator Henry Ford has been a symbol of success based on new approaches to production and business at the same time. He began his unbreakable journey to this very success as an ordinary mechanic, and then designed his own car and later founded a company that became one of the pillars of the entire American economy. Another way of phrasing it, he is a kind of embodiment of the American dream, that any shoemaker can become a millionaire in this country. But a lot of people want to do it, and only a few succeed. Why is that? Maybe the same Henry Ford knew some secrets and just used them in his own advantage. However, he himself told about it at one time. Greetings from our channel, Wealth History. Today we'd like to talk about Henry Ford, the man who became one of the greatest inventors and businessmen in US history. Let us continue, so keep watching. How wealth is acquired. Wealth, just like happiness, cannot be achieved by direct search. It comes as a byproduct of providing useful services. Henry Ford smiled moderately and closed his own book, My Life, My Achievements, which he had written 2 decades earlier. Even then, he could share his thoughts on this topic. And now, when it's already possible to sum up the results of his long journey, even more so. But he didn't want to write anything else, although if he had decided to do so, he would have made certain adjustments to his previous work. Nevertheless, Ford did not regret anything and believed that he had not lived his life in vain, and therefore now, on this quiet summer evening, he decided to wallow in a little reminiscence. No guests were expected at his residence specifically today, so he could relax, especially since things were going as usual and did not require his personal intervention. Well, that's truly nice. Future farmer. He was born 8 decades ago on a farm near Detroit, and his parents were immigrants originating from Ireland. And most likely he would also be a farmer in the future, but such a fate did not at all attract the ambitious Henry, who believed that he could achieve more in life. Consequently, at the age of 16, he simply ran away from home. Although by that time he had only a church school behind him, it's quite logical that Ford left for the nearest city, Detroit, where he soon managed to get a job in a mechanical workshop as an apprentice. He made this choice for a reason. When he saw a locomobile 4 years ago, Henry decided that he would also dedicate his life to producing such things. But his father did not approve of his love for technology, and therefore the boy decided to learn to work with it on his own. True though, after a few years he did return home, but now he was no longer dependent on his family, and although he worked around the house during the day, at night he was engaged in all sorts of technical innovations. And after a while, he designed a very successful threshing machine with a gasoline engine, which greatly facilitated his father's daily work. And then he patented it and offered the patent to the famous Thomas Edison, who became interested in the promising innovation and even bought it. At the same time, he offered Ford to work for him, to which he immediately agreed. There is no man on earth who cannot achieve more than he thinks he can. Attitude to setbacks. Henry knew what he got himself into. At that moment, he hardly imagined that he would become one of the richest people in America. But what he wanted for sure was to focus on what he loved. And he, despite all the fails, succeeded. For 8 years, he was first a mechanical engineer at the Edison Electric Company and then became its chief engineer. But in his free time, Ford also did not sit idly by. In his small workshop, he designed his first car, which was ready in the year 1896. His tests were successful, and Henry realized that this was the business to which he was ready to devote his entire life: cars. Afterwards, in 1899, he left Edison and became one of the co-owners of the Detroit Automobile Company. But his views on the company's development strategy were very different from those of his companions, and 3 years later, Henry left it. But he continued to develop his vision. So soon, he found the legendary Ford Motor Company, which became a legend of the American automotive industry. Recalling this period of his life, Henry Ford thought again about the validity of his earlier phrase that, "With enthusiasm you can achieve anything. After all, enthusiasm is the cornerstone of all progress, and only with it, any success is possible." Yes, then, once young, he had little money, but there was more than enough enthusiasm and desire to do his job, and do it extremely good, and this soon played a role. At that time, and we are talking about the end of 19th, beginning of 20th century, cars in the United States were a kind of curiosity for the rich or passionate about technology individuals. and therefore their market was relatively small. Ford began to try different ways to attract customers and advertised his brainchild, driving it around the city. This often caused a ridicule, and Henry even now remembered how the teenage boys sometimes whistled after him, but he didn't care about it, and failures didn't scare him at all. Failure is essentially an opportunity to start anew, but more wisely. There is nothing shameful in just failure. What is shameful is to be afraid of failure. 2 decades later, he wrote down this phrase in his book and was ready to repeat it now. After all, whoever is afraid of the future and possible failures narrows the circle of his activities with his own hands, without anyone's intervention. And there are many more people who have surrendered without trying than those who have been defeated. Therefore, Ford was once not afraid to take part in auto racing, challenging the then US champion. The risk paid off. He managed to get ahead of him and thereby attracted the attention of the public, who finally paid attention to his cars. In any case, you will be right. Ford's first mass-produced car was the Ford A model, and for the next few years he improved it in every possible way. And in addition, he worked on a more efficient organization of the production process. It was exactly in those years that he came up with the idea of using a conveyor. And no, contrary to popular belief, he didn't invent it. It was already used in production, but only Henry Ford back then was able to use it on such a scale and with such efficiency. The air is full of ideas. These ideas constantly knock on your head. You just have to know what you want, then forget it and go about your business. The idea will come suddenly. It has always been so. Ideas came to Ford pretty often, and this is not surprising. After all, he was always interested in new things and at the same time focused on the goal. For this man, it was what best motivates a person and makes him go forward, and constantly think about how to achieve it as soon as possible. Although thinking is itself a hard work, but it's necessary to prepare plans for the future, and it's in preparation for upcoming things that the secret of success lies. If you think you can do it, then you'll do it. If it seems to you that you will not succeed, it will also happen. In both cases, you'll be right. Henry Ford always knew he could do it, because he knew that nothing was impossible if he broke it down into rather small, individual tasks. Solving them, he gradually moved forward and eventually coped with the big problems that hindered his path to eventual success. Given time is limited. And he was also convinced that it's possible to become rich if you solve the problems of other people. Let us even add that if they belong to the few, then the reward will be small. But when the problem concerns the majority, then it'll be correspondingly huge. Therefore, there is no point in wasting time walking around problems. You just need to physically solve them. Thinking of this, Henry Ford sighed. Sadly, most people around the globe waste their time and use it incorrectly. But real success can only be achieved through effective time management, and this is a skill to master. There are only 24 hours a day for every individual on Earth, but only very few people achieve their goal, and the rest give up without noticing it. And the thing is, everyone wants to make money, but few people understand that profit from any business should be the result of useful work for the common good. The desire for money in itself is the surest way not to get money. Only the best quality goods and services necessary for people make it possible to receive the largest incomes, and only those who are able to give them will definitely become leaders among others. In other words, authentically serving others is the secret to true success. Ford proved his adherence to these ultimate principles when in 1908 his company began production of the Ford T. It was originally planned for the average American, not for moneybags, and therefore the cost was reduced as much as possible, but not at the expense of lowering the quality. At the same time, the car was no worse than other models, but its price was constantly reduced due to the rationalization of production. And if its starting price was around $850, then after 8 years it fell to $350, with the average annual salary of an American worker at that time being about $600. How he put America on wheels. Later, it was said by many that it was Ford who put America on wheels, and they were absolutely right. At the same time, he didn't pay attention to competitors and did not waste time fighting them, but simply improved his cars, because he was deeply convinced that the time that is spent fighting with competitors is a wasted time. It would be better to use it for work. Nonetheless, he did not abandon this opinion even during the Great Depression, when the company's losses amounted to many millions of dollars. When it seems that the whole world is against you, remember one thing, that the plane takes off against the wind. Ford said aloud and thought that too many people had given up and dropped out of the race, also because they failed to change their business strategy according to the requirements of the time. A person dies when he stops changing, and a funeral is just a formality. Fortunately, he did not persist and made adjustments to the company's policy. For example, he abandoned the principle that a customer can buy a car of any color, as long as that color is black. The crisis was far behind, the company quickly recovered from its consequences and continued to work. Sad to admit, but his only son, to whom he handed over the management of the company, recently died of cancer before he reached the age of 50. So Henry Ford had to take the reins of power into his own hands again. But this is no longer easy for him at his age. Though his grandson, by the way also Henry, showed himself to be a capable guy. Although he's not yet 30 years old. Well, then he will become the next president of Ford Motors. It was already dark and he was about to go to bed. Ford involuntarily thought, what will happen to his company in 50 and even 80 years? He could not know the future, but his brainchild has quite successfully survived to this day, remaining one of the leading automakers in the United States. Well, what about Henry Ford himself? Henry himself went down in history as a self-made man, for whom nothing was impossible. Thank you for watching this episode we've prepared for you. If you enjoyed watching it, do not hesitate and click on one of the episodes on the screen. Subscribe and leave a like, and see you later.